This is eventually what we're gonna get to. There's a couple different examples. For now, we're just gonna paint our sky. So take the largest brush you have that's not your fan brush, and go ahead and make a V at the top and get this top section wet. After you get that top section wet, then what you're gonna do is start with your lightest color. So pick out a light blue to start. And we're just gonna do a wet on wet galaxy. And spread the blue around. Then we're gonna grab a light purple. The more you guys rub your pigment, as you already know, the brighter your colors will get. This is just a reminder though. Daylight savings happened, so we're a little bit tired. That's okay. That's why reminders are helpful right now. So go ahead and just dab some light purple. Ooh, that spot wasn't wet, so I'm gonna add some color to it. A little bit more water. Now you've got light blue, light purple. Let's grab our dark blue. Again, the more you rub the color, the brighter your pigment's gonna be. Just dab some blue in there. You don't want your colors to mix all the way. You still want them to be nice and vibrant, but you can overlap them. Purple and blue mix well together. And just dab them in there wherever you feel like they need to go. Definitely make sure you get around the dots, because what's going to happen is next class we'll peel off the dots, and wherever the dots were, it'll stay the same color as the paper. So this stuff is super fancy. It's called masking fluid. Miss Kohler and I prepped your papers before class so that it would have time to dry. But on our next project, if you want to use it, you're welcome to. Let's grab dark purple for our last color and just dab it wherever you want. I like to have the darker colors kind of go on the outside and then fade into the lighter colors so that it gives the illusion of some like depth of field. If you realize you want some more light blue somewhere, some more light purple, maybe you want to add some pink to yours, go for it. Just finish out your sky, and we're going to set this off to the side so it can dry. And again, if you need more water in an area, if it's dried up on you, feel free to just scoop some more water out, dab it on there. Thank you guys for jumping right into it, getting straight into painting. We've got actually quite a few techniques to cover today, so hopefully this will make it so we have more time to free paint. You can have yours bleed or blend as much as you want. If you want to see the little dots, let them be there. If you want to do more paint strokes with yours, really up to you. And of course, when you're done, just rinse your brush off really well and make sure you've got all the pigment out of it, especially with those darker colors. So we're gonna set this one to the side. Ooh, it's a little messy. I'm gonna rip off some paper towel and clean that up. And then we're gonna grab our sketchbook. And we're gonna label this Technique 6.0. And this one, we just get to turn into like an upside down T. So we'll put a line straight across, put one vertical line on it. This first one we do, and I'll zoom in so you guys can see a little bit better. This will be labeled rice. This one over here will be labeled spray. And the one on the bottom will be labeled sponge. So you guys are smart, you already guessed it. This one we're gonna use our rice pieces. So if you don't have a couple grains of rice, definitely make sure to grab some. The spray, there's a bottle somewhere in your table row. We've got 2 extras back here if there's not one near you. And then the sponge, there's these funny looking sponges back there. They were alive at one point. Sorry, we killed SpongeBob. So those will be for the bottom. If you need any of that, feel free to go help yourself. And again, we just labeled it Technique 6.0, rice, spray, and sponge. Cool. I'm going to zoom back out if that's okay. If you happen to write with the water-soluble pencil, you're not going to want to touch your writing because it'll dissolve. So, just as a heads up. For the rice, we're just going to do some wet on wet, and then we're going to sprinkle the rice on top of it. So pick out your favorite brush and just make any shape you want with the water. Get a healthy amount on there. And then usually if you pick darker colors, you'll see the effect more. And of course, the more you rub your colors, the more pigment you're gonna get. So I'm just gonna grab some dark purple, throw it on there super quick. And then it doesn't take a lot of rice to do this with, but just put at least like 5 grains on there. If you forgot rice, your neighbor might have some. You could ask them for some, because most of our neighbors in here are nice. If you have the ability to make a cool shape with it, feel free. What's gonna happen is, as you guys know, because you're smart, is rice soaks up a lot of water. It also soaks up a lot of pigment. And so as the rice just kicks it here on your paper, it's going to eventually soak up some of the pigment and some of the water, kind of like the salt effect. But the other thing you're going to want to do is just leave it. Don't push it around. Don't try to give it an earthquake. Just let it be. For the spray one, I want you guys to watch it first and then do it. The other reason for that is so that once the spray bottle gets to you, then you can do it. So I'll take a pause after I show you the spray to make sure everybody gets a chance to do it. Awesome, thank you. So again, take your favorite brush. Whoopsie, I just flung rice into my paint set. That's not good. Get that out. You're gonna do wet on wet again. So pick whatever color you want, but put water down first. Darker colors, again, usually show the effect better. So black, blue, purple. If you would like to do more than one color, you could mix 2 colors. And then after you do the wet on wet with the water and the pigment, you're gonna take your spray bottle. It only takes 1 or 2 squirts when it's still wet. I'm gonna shield my other area from getting sprayed. 1, 2, and I'm done. So in your bottles is either water or rubbing alcohol. Rubbing alcohol dries faster than water. And so the areas that got sprayed, you can already tell, are lighter than the other areas that didn't get sprayed. You'll also notice we have some overspray going on, because I had a lot of pigment on there. That's okay. That's just some of the fun of the effect. It's a nice surprise. You don't need to spray it a ton, so I'd only spray it once or twice. If you spray it more than that, then you don't really get that contrast to see the effect. And of course, you're going to see it more as it dries. Use your brush. You're going to want to put it in the water. So submerge it all the way so it gets really wet. And then you want to squeeze it out. As you squeeze it, try to look at the water and see if the water is turning any colors of pigment. If it is, dunk it a couple more times so that it's nice and clean for you to use. If you have anything like hanging off it, just leave it there. Try not to rip the sponges, because yeah, keep them as full as you can. Find a spot on your sponge that you think is interesting. So this spot's kind of interesting. And then what you're gonna do is kind of wad it up a little bit so it's about the size of one of your pigments. And then you're just gonna dip it in there. If you dip it in there and a flood starts happening of water, it's too wet. You probably should have squeezed it out more. But you just need it so that it can wet the pigment. If it's looking too dry, like mine kind of looks dry right now, I'm gonna add some more water. The thing I love about the sponges is you get this great contrast. Automatically, you've got dark places and light places, so it really creates a nice feel. If you didn't get enough water last time, don't squeeze your sponge out so hard. If you need a little bit more water, you could add water with your paintbrush to your pigment, or you could just get a little bit of extra water this time. Try out a different color. Again, find a space on your sponge that looks interesting to you. Kind of wad it up into that shape of your pigments and just dab it in your pigment. Dabbing it'll get the paint off just enough. You don't have to rub it. If you start rubbing it, oh, you're gonna make a mess. And then you're gonna have fun cleaning your paint set. Again, if you squeeze it out and it like puddles, wring your sponge out better next time. And if it's getting too dry, add a little bit more water. If you'd like to layer some colors on top of each other, feel free, but just like your paintbrush, rinse it out. So dip it in your water, squeeze it, so that you have a clean sponge. And I'm gonna overlap some dark blue on this just to see what happens. Uh-oh, my sponge fell apart. Sad. Poor sponge. These are natural sponges, most of them. There are a few synthetic ones. So you'll get, excuse me, just kind of more variety since they are natural. But because they're natural, they're also a lot more expensive. So just be kind to our sponges. That's why we don't want to rip them up. Cool. So that's the rice, the spray, and the sponge technique. When you're done with your sponge, of course, give it a good little bath, rinse it out really well. Whoop, squeeze it a couple times. It's a lot nicer to use the yogurt container for our water container so that we can dip our sponge. And then just leave your sponge resting on your paper towel. And then that way it'll kind of dry out a little bit better. And if there's any pigment left over, then we just know like, oh hey, I need to rinse it out. Sorry if you got one that somebody else failed to rinse out. So those are our 3 techniques. We can just put those off to the side. And now grab your blank piece of paper. Grab your water-soluble pencil. And we're gonna do this next. So draw a line with your water-soluble pencil about halfway down. And on the left side, go ahead and just start drawing something. Whatever you want. Of course, keep it school appropriate. I know you're having fun. We're still at school. You could write your name. Draw your favorite animal. You could draw a mountain, a tree, your favorite sports logo. You could just do some scribbles. The more of this pencil that you unload on your paper, so the more graphite you get, the more pigment you're gonna have to work with. So I would highly recommend having an area where you shade in quite a bit, or just color in with the pencil. It's just gonna give you more to work with. kind of go over your areas with lines a couple times. And then after you've done all the work with your pencil that you want to do, pick up your favorite paintbrush. You can just start painting the pencil. If any of you guys had those cool coloring books that were like pigmented and then you just got to paint on top of them, lucky you. I never had those as a kid. Those were expensive. But this is kind of like that, where all you got to do is just add water. And then you just push the pigment around. So something to be mindful of is that your paintbrush, once you start painting with this, has that grayish, blackish color on it. So if you want to use it cleanly, of course rinse your brush off. But this is a really nice way to get a lot of gradation out of one color. So it's kind of a cool monochromatic. However, black is not a color. Kind of reminds me of charcoal. For those of you who maybe have Santos's drawing class and you've been working with charcoal lately, except it's charcoal with water. And you can pull the pigment into a wet area just like you would with wet on wet if you want it to subtly be gray. Something to take note of is where you drew with this stuff. You'll still have kind of a line from the pencil mark, so you can't really necessarily disappear your line by rubbing it. So as long as you make a line with it that you want to be on your actual paper, oops, I just smudged mine, then the rest you can just dissolve. So if you get a smudge like that, just work with it, turn it into something. You can mix this with color. So let's say I want to turn that nose a little bit pink. I can grab some red and a little bit of white. Of course, rinse your brush out before you grab your color, because your brush has gray on it. People who really like a little bit more control and prefer drawing over painting, water-soluble pencils are a really nice tool. We also have water-soluble colored pencils that you can use for your project. So if you're liking this water-soluble pencil, feel free to use it on your project as well. I'm just gonna dab this section. Getting a little too bleedy over here. Our cat is crying. On the other side, I want you guys to experiment with making your paper wet first, and then drawing with the paper on top of the wet area. So just throw some water on your other side. If you press too hard, your paper will rip. So kind of hover your pencil on top of your paper. And just like we did before, you might need to unload more of the graphite as you start marking. So go back and forth over an area. And then that way you can see the effect of the pencil on a wet surface. You'll notice your lines are finer, they're not bleeding as much. But yeah, get the paper wet first, and then just, you know, maybe write your name, scribble on it, draw something, just experiment. If you want to bring in some pigment, you can throw some pigment on there, see what else it does. Just play. See how it bleeds in with the water-soluble pencil. It's fun to do something a little bit more abstract. And if you want to go back to the pencil after adding color, you know, see if you can push the color around with the pencil. That's kind of fun too. Or just to layer it. The pencil is obviously going to be not as dark when you're drawing on top of the water, because the water is dissolving some of that pencil. But if you hit a dry area of the paper, you are going to get some darker marks. So again, just experiment with that, have some fun with it. So the left side we drew first, and then we made it wet. And you'll see that the pencil, if you used a lot of it, it granulates out, so the grains kind of separate and make this cool chalky look. And then on the right side, we made it wet first. Then we drew on top of it, we added some extra pigment. All right, let's go back to our paper with the dots on it from the masking fluid. We're gonna play with our fan brush. Just like any brush, let's make sure it's clean first. So dip it in the water. With your fan brush, obviously you're gonna do strokes this way, in the direction of the fan. We're not gonna do what we call scrubbing. So scrubbing is where you would take a brush and like go back and forth, like you're trying to scrub an area. If you scrub with a fan brush, oh, it just hurts it. So don't do that. So we're gonna start with our trees. There's a lot of cool things you can do with the trees. And I'm gonna use black. So you're gonna notice your fan brush doesn't really fit. So just kind of give it a little lean to one side, lean to the other side, give it a little flip, lean to one side, lean to the other side, and then you can get some black out of there. If we need to clean our paints, that's okay. And then, if your background is dry, you can paint on top of it. If it's still wet, I would stay down here. Mine is dry, I think, so I can paint on top of it. I'm just gonna make a quick little line with my fan brush. And then, now comes the fun part. You can do little dots with your fan brush. And I'm kind of angling my brush at a 45, so it's kind of sideways right now. And I'm just doing straight down dots. Pretty quick little taps. However, as I'm going down my tree, I'm going from narrow to wide. So we're trying to bring the edges of our tree out, which is what naturally happens when trees grow. So the branches on the bottom, they gotta get sunlight too. The only way for them to get sunlight is to grow out farther. So that's why trees are wider at the bottom and pointier at the top, so that everybody can get some sunlight. Cool. So that's one version with a fan brush. Ooh, let's zoom in on that. That's a little hard to see, sorry. Another version with a fan brush, if we give ourselves another line again. If you're having a hard time making a line with a fan brush, feel free to grab a flat brush real quick and just give yourself a vertical line. It is a lot easier for me to freeze my brush in my hand and pull actually with my back to get that vertical line. I am not using my wrist at all. If I use my wrist, that line's gonna get all sorts of crooked. All right, back to our fan brush. This time, we're gonna do like little swoops out to the side. So I've got pigment on my brush. You can tell it's a little bit dry because it's separated. And now we're just gonna pull it out and kind of give it a little flick. Almost like eyelashes. And then as I get down to the bottom, I'm just gonna make those wider. So that's another style. I find it really hard to go the opposite way. So there's this good cheat. It's called turn your paper upside down. And then you're going the same direction you did before. So you're gonna get like the same style as before. If you get a couple extra little wispies in there, just roll with it. Trees aren't perfect, especially after windstorms. And then flip your paper back. For the next trees, just play. See what other techniques you can come up with. If there's one that you really liked, use that one. If you want to try to dry brush more, that's what this one is that I just did, because I didn't go back and grab new pigment. If you want to try using your round brush or your flat brush, feel free. Just experiment. Technique days are experiment days, and we don't have a lot of technique days left. For term 4, we will use acrylic paints as well, and we'll do those after we finish out with watercolor. We've got some cool contests coming up. We have the graduation cover. We have an art show at the end of this month at Eccles Art Center. And that one's our district-wide art show. So if you've ever done that, like when you're in elementary school or maybe in junior high, it's that show. Except it's been virtual for the last 2 years. So maybe it was like elementary school that you guys remember doing the Festival of Arts. There's a Ogden flag contest that we'll do too, where there's a $1,000 prize. And then we'll do some final choice paintings and the school year will be over, which is kind of crazy. And don't worry if you mess up one of your trees, it's okay. All my trees on this example look different because I was just playing. Same with this one. And this one. Once your trees are dry, if you would like to do the drips that we did last class, the vertical drips, you can. And if you're not there yet, that's okay. Just kind of pop your head up so you can see what's going on. If you do this while your black trees are still wet, then the trees might run a little bit, so just be mindful of that. And pick whatever color you want for the bottom. Again, the more pigment you add, of course, the brighter it'll be. I'm going to throw in a couple extra dots just to give it that painterly look. And then if you want to control where your vertical drips go, just pull lines down. And then that'll tell the water to go that direction. Water follows water. Tip it up and just give it some taparoos. And that's a good start. I'm going to give it a few more. You can come in with a different color. Again, just make some vertical lines to encourage it to go in that direction. If you really want some good drips, add some water at the top of it. Whoa, it's already running. And that'll make it go. And then tap it again. As you guys know, this will make your desk super dirty. Not a big deal. We've got wipes. And if your paint set today got dirty from the sponge or from the fan brush, it's okay. We got those wipes. We can clean them out. Then we'll give it another tap. I could keep going with this and build up like 5 or 6 layers, but I want to let you guys go so you can have fun and do your own thing. So, just a quick recap. Technique 6.0, we got the rice, we got the spray, we have the sponge, we have the water-soluble pencil, and we also have the masking fluid dots, as well as the fan brush to use. So you've got a lot of tools at your disposal. You just need to use one. You should have, oh, maybe not. We'll bring around some extra paper. So this is your paper to experiment with Technique 6.0. As always, if you mess up on this, it's not going the way you want, whatever, toss it, grab a new one. Or if you have multiple ideas that you want to test out for a potential future project, feel free to grab another piece of paper and test it out. We get out at 10:16, so you have at least 20 minutes to play. So have fun. Any questions before we let you guys go?